just bring the gang together for a group photo, and we'll start. Fantastic. For the kind of people at home to watch it on television. Thank you very much. If you take your places. Director of Photography, Alexander Dion. Next to him, the costume designer, whose previous credits include the Safdie brothers, Good Time, and Uncut Gems, Miyako Balizzi. Our next guest is the production designer. Among her previous credits, I'll mention Oksha, which premiered in Cannes, and the Coen brothers' Inside Llewyn Davis and No Country for Old Men, Deborah Jensen. We'll jump to my side of the table with the scriptwriter. He's been nominated for the PEN Faulkner Award for Fiction and the Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Fiction. He won the PEN Short Story Prize for Emerging Writers and a Pushcart Prize. We'll also see him acting in the upcoming short Sweet Freedom, scriptwriter Ben Shattuck. And a few years before he conquered the world with Gladiator, Paul Mescal already conquered the world with his role in Normal People. He's been nominated for an Academy Award and took a BAFTA for his role in Aftersun. He's also won a Laurence Olivier Award for acting on stage in the role of Lionel, Paul Mescal. And finally, the director. This is his second film to premiere in Cannes after Beauty, which won the Queer Palm. His previous film, Living, earned 2 Academy Award nominations. Director Oliver Hermanus. Before we open up the question, while everyone's catching their breath, I'm going to start with a question to Ben. And Ben, I'm curious, was the gramophone, the phonograph at the beginning already of this story?
Yeah, that was one of the initial elements that started the story. I'd read somewhere that it was Edison's only invention that worked from concept to mock-up. And it was as if he received as I think of it, like a transmission from the divine. He just thought of the idea and he drew it up, his engineer made it, and it just worked the first time. Yeah.
And why was it there at the story? What did it represent for you?
I had this, when I read that, I thought, I mean, artifacts for people, an artifact you find in the past often contains an entire life of somebody in the past. And so I thought if I could just wash that artifact into the present from the past, it was really, it was the linchpin of a story itself. And the characters grew out of that, that artifact of the wax cylinder.
Thank you. Oliver, I'd like to ask you, you've put together an amazing cast. I'm not thinking only of your 2 superlative male leads, but also in supporting roles, Molly Price, Hadley Robinson, Emma Canning, to mention only them. How did you put this amazing cast together? What were you looking for in the actors?
Whenever you do a period film, you're always looking for, I suppose, great faces that feel that they fit the period of the movie. And we had a fantastic casting director, Susan Shopmaker, who's an incredible casting director. And I can only credit her for helping me find these amazing faces and actors, because it was my first film in the US, so I was kind of green to the pool of actors in New York.
It was your first film in the US, but you didn't cast American actors for the leads.
Well, that was because I'd met Paul and Josh organically years before, and we kind of never even realized that we were making a film in America until he had started learning the accent.
Thank you very much. I'm going to open up the question on the right side.
Hi. Is this on? I don't hear myself. Okay. Hi, I'm Selena with The Upcoming. My question is to the director, and I'm guessing it could also concern the DP. With Lionel, you have the story is told in a quite distilled manner, but with Lionel, you have a protagonist who experiences synesthesia, so he can see and taste sounds. Was there ever any deliberation to include this element in a more stylistic manner in the film?
So the interesting thing about synesthesia is that every person experiences it in a different way. It's not like a single combination of things. You can have taste and color in your eyes, or you can see complete colors and not have any vision at all. We tried many things. We went up to Provincetown Provincetown, we shot a lot of different ideas, and yeah, it was something that we explored. But then I decided in the end it was something I was going to play with in the actual sounds, that Lionel is escaping into references when he feels and hears certain sounds that trigger memories.
Thank you. Question on the left.
Judita de Silva, Arise Play, Nigeria. My question is for Paul. After watching the film, like many people, I was heartbroken, and then typically was thinking, oh, why didn't he do this? Why didn't he do that? He should have said this, he should have said that. But then those words that Josh's character said about he just felt there was a wrong note inside of him made me think of nature. That perhaps for the story to be different, the men would have to be different, and then Ben and Oliver are telling a different story. So for you, having played the character and delved into the story, do you think that upon reflection, the nature of who Josh's character is and the nature of who your character is, this was the only version of events that was destined to unfold for those two men?
I really like the question, because I think it kind of cuts to the core of what I find very interesting about these two characters in particular. But I think there's a flaw in the question insofar as is that I think, or what I think the film and what Chris Cooper's speech at the end of the film is saying is that I wouldn't have changed anything, because I think you can wish your life away in versions of conversations that you wished you had with loved ones. And I think what Ben has written so beautifully and what Oliver directed so beautifully is you have deep tragedy in the loss of somebody that you love, but at the end of one's life, if you have lived your life fully enough that you can look back with no regret, and then that tragedy hopefully turns into something more beautiful, I think.
Thank you. A question on the right.
Hi, this is Polly from Greece. Thank you for this film. I think that most of us in this room and all the people that passionately love cinema, we love music as well. And I wanted to ask the panel and everybody, and each one of you, if you have one song that kind of defines you, like if you want to tell somebody, do you want to know something about me? Don't read anything about me, listen to the song, which that would be. Thank you.
No pressure, Alexander. Some suggestions?
I don't really know music very well. I don't know, something Phil Collins wrote, because my dad really liked Phil Collins.
Great
Yeah,
answer.
sweet.
I'll just say The Cure. Oh, wow.
Would you mind speaking into the mic, closer to the microphone? Thanks.
You know, in a way, I would say that that Silver Dagger actually came to be a very powerful thing for me because it touched on losses that I've experienced. And
For anyone who hasn't seen the film yet, The Silver Dagger is a gorgeous ballad that comes up in the film.
Oh, it's my turn. We had this question yesterday. I've now forgotten my answer. I think it's definitely something by Radiohead. I think it might be Fade Away.
The first, it's a song called For You by Laura Marling at the moment. It'll probably change tomorrow, but that's my answer today.
I mean, so much of what I love or parts of my life are stitched into the film itself, and in part, Silver Dagger was when I was younger, I grew up in a really rural area, baling hay, and there were contra dances. It was, as my wife said when she came to my town, it was as if our town crouched and time stepped over it. And I remember hearing Silver Dagger when I was really little, and when I also first heard Irish music and the Irish fiddle and the cross-Atlantic, Scotch-Irish, English musical tradition, especially the ballad tradition, it felt like I heard music for the first time. And Silver Dagger holds a really special place in my heart, in my mind, and in my childhood imagination.
Thank you. Alexander, following up on sound, it's unusual, a movie which is such a visual medium, to focus on sound, which is invisible, and it's that invisible qualities touched on and explained so beautifully in the film. But was that a challenge for you? And what were your references, your visual references for shooting?
I think one of the great strengths of Oliver as a director is that he really builds an incredible world, and he puts together these beautiful lookbooks, with many, many images, some that reference certain scenes, some that are just feeling. And that's like a treasure trove for any DP, to start to work with, to have these really salient images that you can kind of start to sink your teeth into and say, oh, what do you like about the purple in this, and what do you like about the light in this? And then you sort of start to build ideas based on that. So it was less, we talked about some rough references, but really it was sort of the core of what Oliver put together and was in his mind, and that Deb and Miyako started to insulate and make whole, and
Thank you. We have a question on the left, yes.
Hi, I'm Alessandra Tommasi from Italy. My question is to Paul. I would like to ask you how, in your opinion, this movie define or redefine masculinity. Thank you.
How do I think, the question being, how do I think this film has defined or redefined masculinity potentially? It's a question that has come up kind of, it's interesting, like we're at the beginning of our journey of talking about the film, and it's interesting to me that this question came up quite a lot yesterday when we were doing press, and it's something that, it's a question that has generally followed the work that I've done, and I still haven't managed to craft an answer that I think is consistent, because I think it's, the question about masculinity to me is that it's ever shifting, and I think maybe in the world of cinema we're moving slightly away from the kind of maybe more alpha traditional leading male characters, and I don't really know how, I don't think the film is defining or attempting to define or redefine masculinity. I think it is being very subjective with their relationship specific to Lionel and David, and I think whatever relationship the audience has to that definition of masculinity is what Ben and Oliver have done. They've left the audience space to project, and I think that that's an important thing. I don't feel qualified enough to answer that question. I apologize.
Question on the right, yes. Please, with the microphone.
Yeah, it's
Madame.
me? Okay.
Yes.
Hi, Nath Curvelo, Brasil, Rede TV. First of all, congratulations. And Paul, what was the biggest challenge for you in making this movie? And recently, you were wearing a Flamengo's jersey. Does that mean you are a Flamengo supporter?
Apparently so. Yes.
The biggest challenge for you.
Biggest challenge, right. I think the greatest challenge and the thing that I'm proudest of in this film is the attempt that we set out as a team to make something that felt authentic and restrained, and not purely that, but there's something very kind of frightening about going into a world where you're really asking an audience to lean in, and I think this film does that. It's not pushing the feeling of the film towards an audience, which I think we've seen done brilliantly in cinema, and in queer cinema in particular, and this kind of idea of repression, and this film isn't really interested in that remotely, but it does require a quality of restraint in the performances, in what me and Josh have to do in particular, that requires a really sure and steady hand in this man here and in the writing and this entire team. So I think, yeah, I think the quality of the restraint in the film was the greatest challenge of the film, and the thing that I think, broadly speaking, we're incredibly proud of. Yeah.
Since we're talking about challenges, it's very unusual we have a chance to speak with costume directors and production directors. So I'd be amiss if I didn't take that opportunity to ask you, what were the particular challenges of this film? And can you walk us through the process of preparing?
I'll start with you, Dan. I think the biggest challenge was the breadth of the film and the breadth of a life. So we were working all across the world in Lionel and David's story, but yet we were also anchored in the United States. I mean, very early on, I understood from Oliver that this development of a world that was 360 degrees was so vital. And so, you know, the Kentucky home, for example, we built from scratch because there was no way we would ever find that particular place. And we had almost 360 degrees of vista, which allowed us to breathe in the space and for it to be a full world. And then we also knew we must go to Italy. We couldn't do Italy in America, let's be clear. And we also must go to the Lake District. And so identifying what was so important to actually do spatially, and then we could kind of fill in the other pieces. But those nodal points were so important to establish strong.
Yeah, I agree. I also think just building the world and also being able to shoot in all these different places, I think the research and being able to show the subtle, differences between Italy versus England versus Kentucky through the wardrobe was really important for me to be authentic. And so I think that was my biggest challenge for this film.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Question.
Hi. Okay. Hi, I'm Clementine from Road to Cinema. Paul Mescal, I have a question for you. How did your chemistry with Josh O'Connor build up? Did you already have a connection before filming, or did it grow up on the set?
Josh is one of the easiest person to build chemistry with, as I and the rest of the world knows the person that... Josh has a great gift of the person that the general public sees is very close to the person that we know, and I think that's a very difficult thing for an actor in today's age to be able to do. And that's point number one. And then the second point being, I think we started this film at a very interesting junction in that we'd known each other for about 5 years, and we were definitely friendly, but I think it really helped so that foundation of safety and play was there, but then the relationship really deepened in the 3 or 4 weeks that we were filming. And I think for anyone who's seen the film and the kind of weight of of the themes that we're playing with, the set itself was very light and boyish and nonsensical at times. But I think, and again, it's a testament to Oliver that he didn't try to dictate the tone of the film onto the actors when they were playing. He trusted us to be in whatever kind of emotional state we felt was necessary before we would shoot certain scenes. But I felt very lucky that we knew, myself and Josh knew each other well enough to begin with, but we had a canvas to keep painting on during the filming process.
Oliver, do you have anything to add about that, directing the actors and giving them that space?
The Naughty Boys. Yeah. Yeah, it was really. This movie's been in our lives after Ben wrote the short story for the last 4 or 5 years. Paul, Josh, and I have lived with the history of sound. So when we got to the shooting of the film, it felt like we were finally doing that thing that we've been talking about for so many years. And it did feel very familiar, and everyone was really friendly and close, and we knew each other pretty well. So, I remember at the end of the first week, you and Josh running down a hill because we'd done the first week, and it was like they'd achieved something like a football team. So there was a lot of that warmth and that lightness, which is always great when actors get on and want to hang out and sit inside of tiny cars together because it was cold, and all those things that make my daily life easier, because they're not being precious about being chased back to their trailers and hating each other and walking away and all those kinds of things that can happen on a movie. We were the opposite movie. We were a big happy family.
Thank you. Question on the right. Yes.
Hi, Toy Brazier from Metro in the UK. Congratulations everyone on the film. It's a question for Paul and also Ben and Oliver if you want to weigh in as well. As a film depicting such a kind of tender relationship between two men, the comparisons have already come out with Brokeback Mountain. And I wondered how you felt about that. Is that a comparison that you potentially saw coming? And is there anything that you wanted to do differently to that film? Thank you.
I personally don't see the parallels at all between Brokeback Mountain, other than the fact that we spend a little bit of time in a tent. But each to their own, in terms of how you want. But I do think that there's a bigger question there in the fact that it draws your attention to why do I think that it's not that film? Because that film, to me, when I look at Brokeback Mountain, it's a beautiful film, but it is dealing with the idea of repression. And this film is fundamentally pointed in the opposite direction. So I think, to be honest, I find those comparisons relatively lazy and frustrating. But for the most part, I think that relationship that I have to the film is born out of the fact that it's a celebration of these two men's love, not a kind of film about their repressed relationship with their sexuality.
It did feel like, I don't know if we thought the Brokeback would come, but it wasn't really in our heads at all. When you make a movie, you don't sort of think about comparisons, and I guess there's just a deficiency in this assumption that films with really great actors, well-known actors, playing lovers, in a relationship, the previous sort of incarnation of something that can be comparable is 20 years ago. Obviously just shows that there should be more films about the sort of dynamics and the nuances of queer relationships, of relationships that are beyond the sort of pale, beyond the context of what most movies probably deal with. I definitely personally felt that the idea of History of Sound for me wasn't about the complication of their sexuality. That wasn't the problem between them. That wasn't the thing that was going to keep them apart. What was going to keep them apart was the assumption that they might have other loves in their life and that they might come back to each other and there would be more time. But then when David goes to war, he's distracted by an internal suffering, and that becomes a diminishing of him. And Lionel has to work through what happened and why that happened. And when in searching for that answer, he discovers that his very first love, potentially his great love, was also his last love. And that's where our heart and soul as makers was. And so that was never about like, oh, we have to have loads of sex scenes and the world needs to get Paul and Josh their kids off. And they went. And they do go on a walking trip through Maine. So unfortunately, tents would have to be included in that. And so it's something we feel very strongly about, and very, very proud of how our film is about love in a different context.
Yeah. Thank you. Question on the left, right in the middle, rather.
Hello, Arthur Gadelha, Jornal O Povo do Brasil. My question is for Paul. Paul, I wanted to ask you about music. I saw you singing Carmen, the movie, and that beautiful scene where you singing at sunset. Thanks God it's on Spotify, because I heard every time that song. In History of Sound, you also have the beautiful scene where you sing next to the piano. So could you tell us about your vocal preparation? And if music is something you like and want to continue doing, who knows, maybe you could play the main character in a musical. Thank you.
I love music. I think with this film in particular, it's not music that was unfamiliar to me, as Ben was kind of mentioning. There's lots of kind of traditional Irish music that has influenced the American folk music that we hear in the film. So it's music that I grew up being familiar with, honestly, and one of my favorite parts of the preparation process is we got to work with an amazing musician and artist called Sam Amadon, who's kind of, I would say, a different version of Lionel in another kind of mirrored life. But he is somebody who celebrates these kind of folk songs and reimagines them, and also has his own kind of musical output that's separate to that. But it has always been something that has been important to me inside the world of acting and outside of it, yeah.
Thank you. Question on the right.
Hello. Hello, it's a great pleasure having you here. It's Yannis Rauzos from Greece. I'd like to address a question to Mr. Mescal, mainly, and Mr. Shattuck. This relationship somehow is about finding and losing. Mr. Shattuck somehow believes that he knows about the loss, but what happens to the war makes him somehow reconsider and put him deeper in this darkness. Please describe me about this deep darkness, this deepest darkness that can, an event like this kind of war can destroy a personality. And also, Mr. Mescal, how about this great scene on Lake District? I mean, it's somehow like he believes in his memory that exists something that can find and be quite nice and warm. And he is finding cold, darkness, and hunger. Would you describe me character's choice and characters traveling in the inner part of what Lake District represents to him? Thank you.
Do you want to go first about the...
Sure, yeah. I think when we consider the span of our lives, it's often the positive energy, the positive space that we consider, the jobs we have, the family that we have, our children, the places that we live. But there's a more subtle influence that is always at play, and that's the negative space in our lives, the relationships we didn't have, the thing we didn't say, the time that we didn't take a moment to, as is in the film, ask a character to maybe stay or go with them. And that negative, dark space builds into a rich, coursing river through a life, and it can curl around and surprise you. I think it feels to me, I grew up with a painting background, and whenever I look at Caravaggio's paintings, it's you know, there's the beautiful light and the musculature, but it's also that rich darkness behind the figures in those chiaroscuro paintings that's so interesting and makes the figures pop out. And for me, I think about plot in the same way. It's everything that's not said. It's the relationship not taken, and that feels like as momentous as the choices that you do make.
I'm really pleased that you mentioned that sequence in the Lake District. You know, when you have those dreams about how you want your life to go, and then when you're with your best intentions trying to achieve it, you're confronted with the polar opposite. And I think for me, that moment with Lionel is kind of this intentional yet mindless pilgrimage towards David, because of one conversation he had with somebody that he loved. And I always found that incredibly moving, that the reason he goes to the Lake District, and if you think about how long it would have taken him to travel to that point, because David once said that it was the most beautiful place he'd ever seen. I think it's one of the most romantic gestures that I've ever read in a script. So when he arrives there, he's confronted with the reality of his life. He's confronted with his mourning, and yet he doesn't have an opportunity or anybody to express that with other than these two strangers. And I was actually talking to Ben about this amazing economy with which he writes Lionel's grief, because we see Lionel in scenes in the film where he's confronted with Belle, David's wife, and these two strangers in the Lake District. It's impossible for him to say or express or break down in any of these moments. So instead he says, I guess I'm a bit embarrassed that I got lost. Or a friend a long time ago said that I would like it here. I guess I'm a bit embarrassed getting lost. I paraphrase you, I apologize. But I always, and that was one of the last things we shot, and I remember that being a surprisingly difficult scene. But yeah.
Next question.
Hi, I'm Zach. I'm from London. I'm speaking for Future First. My question is for Paul. Firstly, congratulations on the film. And it seems you have quite an affinity towards playing quietly devastating characters throughout your career. Is there any reason or any kind of creative process?
No comment. No, sorry.
Is there any, I guess, any reason why you feel particularly drawn towards those, or if that helped you embrace your creative process? And since Josh isn't here, could you perhaps share any fond memory or experience that really perfectly describes your relationship and your perception of Josh?
I don't know why I'm drawn to. I think it's just. I think it's instinct. I think these are the scripts that I got to read this, and it never really felt like a choice. It had to happen. I had to make this with Ollie. I had to make this with these people. So I suppose other people draw the comparisons, and I totally understand them. And I think it does exist. I think what Ben was saying about these paintings and painters having a certain style. I personally celebrate actors who lean into their artistic compulsion, and if that's what I'm compelled to do at the moment in my career, I'm gonna just hopefully pursue that for a little while longer until that compulsion changes. Josh, it sounds kind of coy, but Josh is just like incredibly silly to me. He's just we were on these like we got fixated on this diet during the shooting process, but we would also become fixated on having 8 Jolly Ranchers a day, and they would be delivered to us in these tiny little like plastic cups, and we would sit there eating the 8, and then of course we'd finish the 8, and we would get 8 more and be like, we'll just take 8 off tomorrow. But it's hard. If there's a microcosm to our relationship, I think of Josh and I think of Jolly Ranchers, and he'll get this. I know he will see this and be like, he'll get it. Yeah.
Thank you. A question on the right.
Hello, Diane Carson, the Alliance of Women Film Journalists in the St. Louis art scene. And I am from the Midwest US. I have heard and celebrated this music my entire life, including people sitting on their front porches and singing, and people just sitting and enjoying it. And I could almost show you one of those places where you could have shot. So my question is, how did you research the music? Because you got it so right. How did you make your choices? And do you think, and I hope, this might prompt some interest in this great folk music?
Yeah, the one benefit of the very long journey to finance the film and to make a drama, I guess, which has become a kind of a naughty word in cinema, was that we got a lot of time to share Spotify playlists. And Ben, you were the originator of the first playlist. That playlist was very extensive, and I shared it with Paul, and we kind of all just absorbed the music. And then when it came time to making the choices for the actual film, Silver Dagger was always in there. And then the rest were kind of I would consult with Ben, I would consult with Paul, I would consult with Sam Amadon. And then once we sort of chose them, I sort of swapped some of them around. And it was kind of always an organic question of which song fit who and when. And what I love about the Silver Dagger Across the Rocky Mountains relationship is that, so Across the Rocky Mountains is the song that Lionel's father sings on the porch, and that's the song that David is singing in the bar, and then that's the song that Lionel sings to his mother when she says, "Sing me something," because now Lionel is thinking about David. And so the songs become connected and they travel through the characters' emotions. And then, of course, at the very end of the film, David is singing Silver Dagger back to Lionel. So that was always very important that whatever those 2 pieces of music was going to be. And then Sam was so wonderful in educating us in how to sing and the sort of tonality of that. And I will just say, because you're from the Midwest, I'm glad you thought that we got that all right, because we shot History of Sound in New Jersey, which is an incredible feat of production design, to be able to make New Jersey and parts of Maine, to shoot New Jersey as Maine and Kentucky and even a bit of England. So,
yeah, a bit of England too. A lot of mud.
Hi.
Sorry.
Rebecca Olsen, OnePress TV, Sweden. My question is for Paul. There's this theme of love and loss. I want to know, what did you learn that may be new or unexpected about love from this character?
From this character. It's interesting because I was 24 when I first read the script, Is that, yeah, roughly around that. And then getting to make it as a 28-year-old at the time, I don't think I would have been able. I don't think I would have been able to play that role the same way. And I can't be kind of direct with the answer, not kind of, because I just think life happens. Love, I think, is a very complicated. What's the thing? Andrew Scott's speech in Fleabag about love at the end. Do you know that? Like, I think it's a wonderful at the wedding, but it's like that's what I think about with it. I think it's a very hard thing to pin down, and I think again, what I found so moving about the screenplay is it's like it's never really described in words. It's described in actions. It's described in things that you don't see. So when David is putting the feathers into the pillowcase, it's a total act of love that is not perceived by Lionel. And I think that's something in my own life that I think I've learned, is that like kindness is wildly underrated in romantic relationships and should be celebrated, I think.
Oliver, the story is expanded to include the main sequence, I think, the original short story. What did you bring as a South African or as a filmmaker of South African origin to this project, to this story?
When Ben and I started building it out, my first question was about sort of racial dynamics. You know, were there communities that the song collecting trip could encounter that would be about, you know, different races, different backgrounds, and Ben very quickly suggested Malaga Island, and so that became an addition to the screenplay. And you know, Ben is so amazing because he can just recall something incredibly interesting and incredibly detailed in a second, and can then 3 days later write an entire sequence that is sort of like historically correct and just fascinating.
Was this important for you personally, given?
Absolutely. You know, I come from South Africa, and you know, I'm from a background of racial segregation. I was born under apartheid. My family was oppressed by that system, and we have the experience in Malaga Island of a community of people who are being evicted, which is the reality of people of my race in South Africa in the 60s and 70s. So those stories of interracial communities being marginalized and being kicked out, this question of immigration, you know, is obviously something that I feel very strongly about as a South African filmmaker and person.
Thank you. Question in the middle.
Hi, I'm André Guerra from Brazil, Diário de Pernambuco. I would like to ask Paul about your energy, because you are so joyful always on your interviews, and on set, how is your behavior? How do you feel interpreting these so deep and dark, sometimes sad roles? And this particularly is perhaps one of the most introspective roles in your career. So I would like to know, how was your energy on set? Thank you.
Well, Oliver defines it as overwhelming and multiple times in interviews yesterday. So, in a good way, apparently. I don't know. I think if you are depressive leaning as a person, it makes it. I don't know how to. It's hard on set to sometimes. I'm not going to be this version of myself on set, because you kind of, as an actor, you get used to splitting your personality up, which is useful at work and sometimes unhealthy in life, but it's just kind of par for the course. But I think on set, how would you describe it? I think with Josh, there was a very specific feeling. It felt playful, it felt light. And then I think it became a lot stiller after he left. Yeah. I felt like I was holding on to Oliver. I was holding on to Oliver the whole time, but I felt like after Josh left, there was a real, I was kind of like this a lot of the time. I think I tend to work quietly, like on a practical sense, I think I tend to work quietly and try to make it efficient in terms of communication. but Oliver would be able to answer it better than I would say.
And Paul's the kind of actor I could be standing on the set and he'd be still getting ready, and I'd see something, or we'd see something, and the light might be going because it's a natural lighting situation that I've just seen, and I would like to shoot, and I would then break all the rules, not tell the first AD, not tell the second AD. I would just call Paul on his cell phone and be like, "Run here now," and he would come running. I mean, that was such an amazing thing. He would come running from his trailer, and then the makeup and hair people would be running behind him because he's barely dressed, and then he's lying and it's in the film. He's lying in a pool of light in the farmhouse, and there was the real sun coming through the door, and I wanted to capture that moment, and I just lie down here, quick, let's go, and that's why it's overwhelming.
Right. I'm glad I got that qualification today.
I suppose what I mean by overwhelming is that it's an overwhelming love and affection and determination to make beautiful work.
Thanks.
Question on the left, yes.
Hello, Lazar Chrismo for BNR Radio. I have a short question for Mr. Mescal. You've worked with Mr. Hermanus, an actor. You've worked with Charlotte Wells, also an actor. You've worked with Ridley Scott and other great directors. My question is, I guess, for the future, which director do you want to work with, and what is your inspiration for a particular director?
What is my inspiration? I think I've been very, very lucky to work with directors that I deeply, deeply admire. And all of those directors you've mentioned, I would love to work with again. I think this relationship with Ollie in particular is one that feels incredibly special to me because it's a relationship that began 5 years ago. And it's the first time I think I've worked on a film where there's been a line of communication and friendship that is built prior to filming commencing. So it means that you don't arrive onto set with the actor's compulsion to impress the director and remind them why they hired you. So we arrived at a point where I trusted him and he trusted me, and I just think he's the most extraordinary director. I remember watching Moffy for the first time and being like, spear carrier, third from the right, I'm in. I just think he's singular. His vision is so singular. His relationship to actors, I think if you look at any of the films from an actor's perspective, and film broadly, but specifically from an actor's perspective, he always directs brilliant, brilliant performances within brilliant, brilliant films. So I hope this to be the first of many films that I do with Ollie. Easy, yeah.
But I'm afraid our time's up. Thank you for this amazing film. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.